shout out to older gentlemen who end up leaving their country because they realize they're on the side of evil. It's an oddly specific gender, but it has to be one of my favorites. It started with Lorenz back in Fire Emblem 1 and has been used pretty effectively since. It's one of those Fire Emblem tropes that I don't think has a bad entry. They all do their job well and differently enough to be distinct from one another. Today, we'll be looking at Hannibal specifically. Sadly, no, not the man who almost brought down the Roman Empire in the Second Punic War. Instead, we're talking about the Hannibal from Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. So strap in as we cover one of FE4's best fathers. An award he holds because he's one of the only two not dead, but it is an award he holds nevertheless.
There is no meme. This is just a threat.
Hannibal's first scene comes in the middle of the second generation, where he's a general in the Thracian army under its mercenary king Travant. Thracia decided to align itself with the big bad evil empire, and that decision has gone as well as one would think, with the Liberation Army beating their ass in the name of them not being literally Satan. Hannibal is berating Travant for being on the wrong side of history, and is desperately trying to convince him to surrender to the Liberators and let Thracia's people rest and recover, which is a completely normal and sane thing to say. Travant's response to common sense is to kidnap Hannibal's adopted son, either Corporal or Charlo, depending on if you need a substitute, and he tells Hannibal that he has to fight on the front lines, or else the kid will be sent to God with express shipping. This scene does quite a few things for Hannibal right out of the gate. First, it immediately gets the player on his side by having him argue with Travant specifically. Travant has been built up as a villain since the first generation of the game. In fact, he's directly responsible for the murder of two of Genealogy's most likable characters, Quan and Ethelyn. So to see someone finally verbally berate him after all this time is very cathartic, and gives Hannibal a very strong first impression. It also does a lot for Travant's character, as Travant belittles Hannibal for caring so much about his son when they aren't even related by blood. Have you ever heard of the idiom, when you point your finger, 3 fingers point back at you? That's exactly what Travant is doing, as his love for his adopted daughter Altena is a big part of his own character, so him berating Hannibal is definitely intended to be some self-projecting. Travant is trying to justify what he makes Altena do by thinking that you can't love an adopted child like your own flesh and blood. It's a solid intro for Hannibal's character and helps out one of the major villains of FE4. It's a very solid scene. And it leads into what's arguably the most interesting thing about Hannibal: how you manage to recruit him. The player knows that Corporal, or Charlo, has been taken to the castle just after Hannibal's, so what you have to do is ignore Hannibal's castle and seize the one behind it, which will recruit Corporal, or Charlo, and then have him talk to Hannibal, all the while Hannibal is running at you as fast as his armored legs can take him. Given that a lot of recruits in FE4 are just talk to this person, or you get them by playing the game, this stands out as a unique dilemma that has a few interesting solutions. The easiest is to just use the sleep staff to put Hannibal to sleep, and boom, you're free to wander around him. It still isn't perfect, as you still have to deal with all the men that he's around, and being asleep still lets him buff them with his authority stars, but it does buy you some time. Of course, with this being classic Fire Emblem, the funniest way is to cheese it. Some FE4 enemies have a quirk in their AI that means if they start running out of allies, they'll run back to their castle to go in, get some reinforcements, and come back out. But the AI is set to just run to the castle and nothing else, meaning that they won't attack you when they're in this state, So you can put literally anything in Hannibal's way, and he'll be too polite to move them out of the way by force, giving you plenty of time to go get Corporal, or Charlo, and have him make sure Papa is gonna help the good guys. I love Fire Emblem events that can be cheesed, and Hannibal is no exception, making his tricky recruitment one of the most fun things about him. And if you think that doesn't really affect his character, Fire Emblem is a video game, and video game is 2 words. That game part definitely influences how people perceive a character. Look at how many people hate Donald Duck in Kingdom Hearts, not because of anything he says, but because he refuses to heal them. It is a part of these characters, and I think that's what makes them more unique than other mediums. And the punchline to all of this is that once you get him in your army, he is absolute dog water. He's an armor knight in Fire Emblem 4, the game with the largest maps in the franchise, meaning it is very difficult to have him keep up with your army. But let's say you're playing at a casual pace, which is a perfectly fine way to play. If you slow down for FE4 characters like Lewin, Ira, Arthur, Larcé, etc., they can really contribute to your army in a meaningful way. If you slow down for Hannibal, he won't do any of that. His stats are fine for physical tanking, with incredible HP and defense, and his strength is very high, which lets him do some good damage, but his combat is still very lackluster since he doesn't have a reliant way to double attack enemies. And his tanking ability is suspect because when you get him, the game starts throwing a lot of mages at you, which absolutely prey upon him. And his defensive abilities don't really matter because you don't ever really have to protect any castles. Maybe in his join map against Arian's assault, but even then, not really. I always use him because I love my big armor knights, but I also always use Arden to promotion. So can my opinions on units really be trusted? Okay, so with all the unit talk out of the way, what's his character? Well, his relationship with his adopted son is very sweet, and in a unique conversation with Charlo, not Corporal, he confesses that he feels guilt over what happened to him, thinking that Charlo would be happier if he were adopted to a normal family instead of by him. But Charlo puts those fears to rest, telling Hannibal how much he loves his papa and how proud he is to be the son of the great Shield of Thracia, and it's a very sweet scene. Hannibal gifts his son a magical staff that can send any man into a bloodlust-induced frenzy, which is honestly just normal dad stuff, and the two walk together as proud father and son. I like this scene because representation of good adopted or step-parents are not the most common. Sure, found family dynamics are all over the place, but for all the talk someone like, say, Grail gives about being family to his men, his relationship with people like Boyd or Reese is not exactly father and son. Hannibal is outright Corporal, or Charlo's, adopted father, and he's one that so clearly cherishes his child. It matters a lot when adopted and step-parents are so easy to make into villains, for one to have such a positive relationship with their child. And the fact that you have this relationship means people who grew up in these kind of relationships can look at Hannibal and Corporal, or Charlo, and immediately identify with and like them. It's not much, but as always with Fire Emblem character writing, it doesn't need that much to get its point across. And that's actually about it for Hannibal in FE4. Hell, he doesn't even really have an ending in the epilogue. He just goes back to Thracia and helps out, whatever that entails. So that doesn't seem like there's a lot to analyze. But the continent of Yggdrasil has 2 games, and believe it or not, the man known as the Shield of Thracia appears in the midquel game called Thracia 776, for a whopping 1 chapter. But, let me tell you, what he does in that 1 chapter and behind the scenes of several others is more than enough to sink your teeth into, just like the benefits of my Patreon page. That's right, I have a Patreon, where for as little as $3 a month, you can help support the channel and gain access to benefits, like having your name read aloud on videos, or if you pay $7 a month, you can vote on polls for future episodes. Right now, it's a contest between 4 people I literally just threw together without any real sense of cohesion. I also don't even know who's winning at this current moment, because I literally just put the poll up as I was recording for this video. So who knows if your vote actually matters, or if it's just a one-sided kill for Donald. My patrons include the likes of Adebayo Thompson, Andrew Crockett, Bean Juice, Benz Again, Dr. McBackstab, Great Riek, Hell on Heelys, Ichigo D, Camus, Jaeger Guts, Kenpachi, Shiro, Uzumaki, Kiri Yamato, Kratos, Char Frederick Sirius, Balzara Hakuman, The White Void, Despacito 2, Lysevening Bolt, Marth War Criminal, Morgal Organ, Played Arrow, Ranger Man Sam, Shen Lu, the world's most unironic 8.5 tail stand, Very the Artist, Walmart Reader, Yo Girl Owen, Brentendo 11, Drew Hack, Fire Emblem Lord, Ginger, Goo Gaga, Cornelia Milkers 92, Maple Knight, and Upscale Furry Trash. Thank you all for your continued support, and let's get back to Hannibal. In Fire Emblem's Thracia 776, Hannibal appears in the game's 7th chapter as part of the map objective. The game's main Lord Leif is on the run from the Empire's forces. While the Empire and Thracia are technically allies, that doesn't mean the Empire can just waltz into Thracia with armed forces without consequence. So the goal is for Leif's group to get to Hannibal, and like a big brother being a level in Mario that a 4-year-old can't, he's the one that deals with the Empire's forces. Given how lackluster his unit was in Fire Emblem 4, Fire Emblem 5 gives him some time to match his title, as he is unkillable and just a monster once he takes the field, though he isn't likely to actually see any combat as the enemies flee in terror of him. And once Leif escapes the Empire, he feeds Hannibal a lie that he's just a simple passerby, and in no way is he the long-lost Prince of Leonster Leif. He is just some dude named Lou, and is simply passing through as part of the Magi, an unrelated force that's fighting against the Empire. Hannibal lets Leif go, and even gives him one of his own men, Callion, who later reveals that Hannibal knew damn well Leif was lying to him. He just didn't care, and wishes him the best in his campaign against the Empire. This scene shows Hannibal as both clever and compassionate. I'm a big fan of scenes where someone lets someone think they fell for their lie, and this is a good example. It's his only appearance in the game, but it's a solid scene that shows the kind-hearted general he was in FE4 in a way that game didn't have the scenes to flesh him out. But there's more to Hannibal in FE5 than just the scene he's present for, as Hannibal is revealed to have been getting back at the Empire and even King Travant in his own way. As a high-ranking general, Hannibal has access to his own private villa. Now, he doesn't use it to sip martinis by the poolside, he uses it to illegally foster Leonster knights who were displaced after Thracia overtook their country. Hannibal even goes so far as to lie to Princess Altena and tell her that the knights are just mercenaries he hired so that they don't get crushed by Thracia's might. It shows that he's quite crafty when he wants to be, and also, this action is one of the single most important things anyone in Yggdrasil does in either game. Alright, I know that's a bold claim, but let me explain the domino effect. Hannibal letting Leonster knights take refuge in his villa leads to the knight Dryas, as well as his subordinates Glade, Selphina, Robert, Cain, and Alva survive. This act leads to Glade being able to hold down Tara, while Dryas is able to reunite with Leif once he arrives to the villa. This lets Dryas join Leif as a trusted advisor, and walk alongside him as he goes to reinforce Tara and gain the additional aid of Duchess Lenoan and her ensemble. Dryas' guidance also helps Leif retake his homeland of Leonster, just before Dryas himself tragically dies due to Leif's stubbornness, ordering him to march on Ulster and try to take it back from the Empire. So, what happens then if Hannibal doesn't offer that refuge? Well, Dryas and his knights were in no condition to live on the land. Dryas himself was already old and missing an entire arm as it stood, so they likely would have been quickly overtaken by the empire of Thracia's forces and met with an untimely demise. And if Glade and his men aren't there to help Tara, does it last long enough to get aid from Leif? Does Linoan and her group fall at the hands of the Empire's siege, and Leif is unable to gain her assistance? Without all those resources, could Leif have even retaken Leonster, assuming he could have even gotten there in the first place? And if he did get there, what happens when he wants to save Ulster? Does he lead the charge himself and die instead of Dryas? If Leif fails to hold Leonster by either dying or never taking it in the first place, what happens when Seliph arrives in Fire Emblem 4? Without needing to worry about seizing Leonster, Bloom is free to bring his full might down on Seliph. And can Selip's fledgling army survive that? Maybe he can, maybe he can't, but it would all be much harder than it already was. And all that Domino started with was Hannibal just doing what he could. One of FE4's themes is that the average man on his own is tragically incapable of really doing anything in the face of oppression. Jim from accounting does not have the political power or the wealth to stop a corrupt government that does have the funding and power that it got from abusing the population. So because of that, it becomes the responsibility, not the choice, of those who do have the power to do something to act. You draw scorns people like Reinhardt or Ishtar who have the power to make a difference, but don't and allow the wicked status quo to continue. But Hannibal, a man who, in the grand scheme of things, is nothing more than a bit part on a grand stage, used what little power he had to what ends he could. And through that one man's actions, he helped the fight of Leif, a man who did have the power to change the world. And that's what makes Hannibal such a great character. He ties wonderfully into the messages that the world of Yggdrasil wants to tell. Yggdrasil is saved by the men and women of legends. Seliph, Leif, Julia, Shannon, and so on and so forth. But so too is their journey helped by the little kindnesses of those around them. Ideen harboring the children after the death of the men at Valhalla, August using his wisdom to guide a young and impressionable Leif, Finn traversing all of the Thracian peninsula to find refuge for Leif and Nana, and Hannibal harboring Dryas is another one of those small kindnesses. Not everyone can do everything to fight evil, but everyone can do something, and legends are made of those millions of acts. Small deeds by small men that a bigger man can take and make something incredible. Hannibal perfectly captures that. He also has a really nice beard. That doesn't have anything to do with anything, it's just the very end of the episode and I had to bring that up somewhere. Thank you guys very much for making it to the end of another character analysis video. It's been a lot of fun to get back in the swing of things, and I feel like this episode also turned out really well. Thank you all for continuing to do it. We're gonna reach 100 soon. I would also like to thank my buddy Guy the Green Brigand for helping look over the script and make sure I'm talking from my mouth and not from my ass. Though I am known to do the latter, he's making sure I do the former, and I thank him for that. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like, a comment, a subscribe, hit the bell, all that other crap, and if you're so inclined, consider following me on Twitter or joining my Discord. The link to both are in the description, and my Discord is a nice little place where people have a lot of fun and post a lot of that Toho stuff. I don't really know what that's all about, but they really seem to like Toho. I actually don't know what they're going to post when I ask them to post something, but I guarantee you something Toho related is going to come up. So with that being established, thank you all very much, and until next time...